Today's episode of the Gone Fission Nuclear Report is brought to you by Fluor. We're building a better world. Welcome to the Gone Fission Nuclear Report, your one-stop source for all the latest news from the Department of Energy's Environmental Management Program. Now, here's your host, Michael Butler.
Hello, and welcome to the Gone Fission Nuclear Report. Today is Monday, March 13th, 2023. We're covering all the news from the Department of Energy's Environmental Management Program across the country. We thank our friends at Fluor for being presenting sponsor for today's episode. Today, the Gone Fission Nuclear Report focuses on the next chapter of cleanup on the Department of Energy's Oak Ridge Reservation in Tennessee. DOE and its cleanup contractor, UCOR, recorded a major milestone in 2020 when they finished the world's first demolition of a complete gaseous diffusion complex. The historic uranium enrichment facilities in Oak Ridge had produced the fuel for the first atomic bomb that helped end World War II. Now the next chapter of cleanup is underway. UCOR has gone east on the 33,000-acre Oak Ridge site and focused its workforce on major cleanup projects at Oak Ridge National Laboratory and the Y-12 Nuclear Security Complex. Recently, the Gone Fission Nuclear Report traveled to Oak Ridge to talk with UCOR President Ken Rueter about the cleanup challenges that lie ahead and what this industry means to the region's economy.
That environmental cleanup is, again, they're major undertakings. It's generational in nature, and thus it is a sustainable industry. And we really wanted to understand what that meant, because above and beyond the moral and ethical obligations to do environmental cleanup, there's a lot of legal drivers to do it, but first and foremost, it's really about reducing environmental liability, because it's the third largest liability the American taxpayer holds, as a country. And this site has been able to master that, driving that down. But that's not the end of the story, because when you can link environmental liability reduction to reindustrialization, brownfield redevelopment, enabling greenfield development, and federal land reuse, future federal emissions, you now begin to tie the economic outcomes of environmental cleanup to the economic development outcomes of both future federal emissions and commercial emissions. And these numbers here in this site are astronomical. So the environmental cleanup industry in East Tennessee generates $1.3 billion a year GDP equivalent, and puts about roughly $300 million in disposable income directly into these communities. So that's direct cash infusion into the communities in the form of housing and restaurants and lodging and recreation and so forth and so on. And then when you extend that to where the current missions are commercial federal that are all tied together at a reservation level, whether you want to call that science and defense and cleanup together as three principal industries, it's $6.5 billion a year of GDP equivalent, with about $2.9 billion in disposable income being infused into this multi-county region that make up East Tennessee. It is a mega business in itself from an economic development. And we're talking something of the magnitude, in my opinion, of FedEx in Memphis, for example, Volkswagen in Middle Tennessee.
We'll hear more from Ken Rueter in our spotlight interview later in the podcast. And we'll be back with today's headlines after this from Fluor. Another International Waste Management Symposium is in the books. More than 2,500 people registered for the 2023 Waste Management Symposium in Phoenix. In addition to federal officials and a host of contractors, the global conference attracted 145 college students and 37 STEM ambassadors from minority-serving institutions. Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm welcomed the delegates via video, telling them the environmental cleanup program covers land equal to the size of 2 states.
This is the largest environmental cleanup program in the world. It's responsible for an area, I just learned, the size of Rhode Island and Delaware combined, thanks to the work sites at Hanford and Los Alamos and Savannah River. We are helping the families there breathe clean air and drink clean water and raise their children in safe homes. And our work is more than about just restoring the land. It's really about keeping our promises to the American people. It's our responsibility to lift this burden from communities that have shouldered the burden of our safety and to help them achieve a more vibrant and sustainable future. So whether you're one of our federal contractors, whether you're one of our federal employees, whether you're a student or one of our international partners, you have a critical role to play in this mission. Over the next few years, we're going to take our cleanup work to the next level. So the rest of our EM team has told you about what's in store, but the great news is some of these projects are so close to being done. And of course, that's all thanks to the people behind this mission. This industry is made up of some of our nation's best engineers and scientists and project management professionals, and it's powered by the workers who are on the ground, including some of the very best of our trade unions. And we all do it in partnership with one another and with our contractors in the field. So my message to the students and the young professionals who are here to explore this career path is that it is a wonderful opportunity for you to make a good living while making a difference. But we still have work to do, if we're going to be candid, to make this look like America. We know that diversity is what makes the workforce and this country so strong. And at DOE, we're looking at how to build a diverse pipeline of both talent within our agency and from coast to coast. So to all the contractors who are participating today.
EM Senior Advisor Ike White recapped some of the key milestone accomplishments during the past year. These included cocooning the 7th reactor along the Columbia River at the Hanford site, leaving 1 more to go. Beating waste shipment goals at the Los Alamos National Laboratory by over 70%. Completing buried waste remediation, important to Idaho and the health of the state's Snake River aquifer, and beginning demolition of the main plant process building at the West Valley demonstration project. We'll be back with this week's Spotlight interview right after this from Fluor. After a decade as DOE's lead environmental cleanup contractor in Oak Ridge, a revamped UCOR is moving forward in addressing major cleanup challenges at Oak Ridge National Laboratory and the Y-12 National Security Complex. UCOR is working under a new indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity DOE contract. This task-based arrangement is the agency's new contracting model, which focuses on end states. We went to Oak Ridge recently to sit down with UCOR President Ken Rueter to get his take on the future of cleanup at Oak Ridge. Here's that interview.
Ken, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. Glad to be here. Exciting times.
Well, we're glad to have you here today, and thank you for hosting us in Oak Ridge and giving us an opportunity to look around at some of the very impressive cleanup work that's been done here.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's really nice to have you in our studio here. We really make good use of it to kind of, what we always share with folks is that probably one of the most predominant critical things of our delivery model when we finish everything we do is we've got to tell our story. And so this studio has kind of become a big part of that. And we appreciate the opportunity that you're offering us to do that.
Well, thank you. We're very glad to be here, and it is an impressive setup, so thank you for having us. UCOR has been here since 2011 as Department of Energy's lead environmental cleanup contractor. And last year, you were awarded a new contract, and it was different, a different kind of contract, the indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract that's under the new contracting model for DOE. And I'd like to have you talk, if you don't mind, about how that contract and the way you operate now is different from the way you were doing before under your previous contract.
Okay, well, let me start from the beginning. Because you really got to kind of unpack it from that framework or from that perspective. So, we became aware, and there was a lot of discussion, again, as you probably aware, in industry in a 2016, 2017 timeframe that the department wanted to move towards a end state contracting model in which there was very definitive completion milestones that were major initiatives that reduced environmental liability, and they wanted to get that lined up with their 10-year planning process and then drive through the contracts those end state deliveries so that they had measurable, and to our understanding, had measurable milestones that were major moments in time in the accelerated reduction of environmental liability. And so it really all then began there because we were also, the expression of interest and all RFI kind of things came out regarding the Oak Ridge Reservation cleanup contract. And that's when we became informed that they were going to implement end state contract management through the IDIQ approach, which is a task ordering approach. And so it really started to change our business development and our capture strategy because there's different scoring criteria with regard to that. There's different content in the proposal. And ultimately, again, I'm not a marketing capture person. I'm on the other side of the equation on the delivery side. But this was my fifth capture effort. And I've learned something from every one of them with regard to this. And what I learned from this one is that there was going to be a much stronger focus on the team that could demonstrate that they could deliver the end states, both in the form of past performance or your report card, the people that you could bring to do that, and how you could associate them to that past performance through what's called a management approach. Take the next step forward, we couldn't be more thankful that we were successful there. We felt like we put a very good team together. We certainly felt that we saw that in the award response that we got from the client. And then the next element that's then different from that is that you've been selected because it's understood that you can deliver the task orders. So now becomes the heavy lift of preparing the task orders based on the 10-year task ordering plan that the department has put together in partnership with the contractor. And so really there's not a dramatic change in the scope of work. The location where you may be doing the work is different. Like in our case, we moved from ETTP predominantly to the Y-12 National Defense Complex and the Oak Ridge National Lab Science Complex. But the fundamental mission of, deactivating and demolishing buildings and remediating soils and turning land over for federal land reuse, those end states are all the same. That's how it was in the ETTP contract, because it was scope-based. So this is a scope-based initiative, that one. But now you're preparing your task offers after the award, okay? Because you've been given the honor, you've been given the opportunity to implement these tasks. So what really changed for us then was the realization that we would have two duties for a pretty specific period of time. We would be maintaining continuity of cleanup now that we've been awarded the job and successfully transitioned it from the incumbent, which in this case was us, predominantly, and sustaining that momentum so that there wasn't a lull period while you were preparing task orders for what I refer to as the big show, which is a pretty substantial period of time within the overall period of performance of the contract. And that's kind of where we sit today.
You bring up end states, and I think that kind of leads into the next question that I have. UCOR has been on site here for more than a decade now, and you're starting your second round on the contract. End states sort of represent your success. So when you get to the point where your client, the Department of Energy, wanted to get to, which is the end state, let's talk about your successes. What do you see as the most outstanding things that UCOR has done from a cleanup standpoint over the last decade or so?
I would say it's delivering three fundamental commitments. So I call it build what you sold. That was in our proposal that goes all the way back to 2010, 2011 timeframe when we were awarded the ETTP contract, which was delivering three end state commitments that we made to them. One was completing the largest environmental cleanup in the history of this country, which is cleaning up the former Gaseous Diffusion complex that commonly referred to as K25, but was 5 Gaseous Diffusion facilities representing 100 acres under roof, 13 million square feet. And doing that in a manner in which there was a realization that the acceleration of the capitalization or financing of that work could drive marketable cost avoidance of future environmental liability. And that was a multi-step process because we, first we had to come in because, the K25 facility cleanup was really not in a healthy state as a project. We had to come in and recover that, remedy that issue. And then lay out, based on those experiences, a strategy to get all the gaseous diffusion plants remediated, and then lay out a strategy to get the remaining ancillary facilities in the major units of land called exposure units cleaned up, soil remediated, and get that back in the hands of the community, relieving the federal government of that burden and bringing that economic development opportunity to it. The second end state was and this kind of presented itself over time, but around the 2015-16 time frame, the Department of Energy enters into a deal with the Department of Interior to stand up the 409th National Park of this country. And this is kind of a highlight piece for me is that because in our business you don't get to really get involved in building national parks or standing them up, and that opportunity now gets presented to us and becomes an end state. And then the third one was, and I know we'll probably talk a little bit more about this when we get to equity and inclusion concepts, is how do you get former federally owned and handled land back in the hands of the citizens that really should and will be used for natural asset and conservation purposes, which is a big part. And so, we call it environmental justice today. And so those three end states and the delivery of those, to me, are the greatest success of this company.
We've talked about UCOR's accomplishments over the decade or so that you've been here. Let's look ahead for a minute to the coming year, 2023. What are some of the challenges that you face, and what are some of the milestones that you hope to accomplish in terms of progress in the cleanup?
Yeah, so 23 is essentially kind of our full performance year, right? We transitioned in 22. I'd say the greatest challenge that we're facing is to now stand up the cleanup program at the next production level from the excess contaminated facilities program that we facilitated under the previous contract, and deliver it in amidst all these operating facilities. And so there's integration points that you need to now account for, things like laydown areas, personnel logistics, parking, deployment of the crews and the team in a much more high density area. Utilities that are used for production purposes at the lab or at the defense complex that are now in the way of cleanup. And so we've spent a lot of time putting together both an organizational strategy management approach to take on those challenges, but it doesn't change the fact that they are the principal challenge. Looking to what we look to accomplish in 23. One is maintaining continuity of, as I mentioned earlier, maintaining continuity of the cleanup program, consistent with EM's 10-year plan, both at the headquarters level and at the Oak Ridge field office level. Use that to inform us to deliver our strategic plan, which we released in late 22, that then lays out the path to begin our next delivery of Vision. So Vision 2024, which is our next major set of milestones, which will be finishing up the soil remediations at the Heritage Center, formerly ETTP. All of that is enabled by what happens in 23. So we've got some pretty big dirt work activities. Some of the actually one of the largest ones that exist out there. And then the other major milestones is getting the reactor area, former test reactor area at the Oak Ridge National Lab, ready for demolition and kick off demolition, which we did with completing the demolition of the former 3010 facility test reactor, which was actually part of the nuclear propulsion initiative back in the 50s, and then begin to get the other reactors ready, which through what we call deactivation activities, and to finish the Y12 biology complex remediation, which was all a series of 5 buildings, large, hundreds of thousands of square feet. They call it the Mouse House.
Right.
You used to always hear Paul DeBar say that's where which is true, where the Human Genome Project was born out of, and get the soils completed, and better yet, get the site in a transferable condition to NNSA for their start of the lithium processing facility. That was a big milestone for 23. That's also done, and then to make significant progress in the next series of larger buildings, which are referred to as Alpha 2 and Beta 1 Calutron buildings, and predominantly complete deactivation so we can begin demolition in 2024. So for me, 2023's major milestones is one, maintaining that momentum, but ensuring that the very critical and delicate cleanup sequence, which is the entry point into the strategic plan, is maintained, because you've aligned your equipment, your people, your resources, your capitalization, finance, funding, all around a common sequence. And many times you'll hear us say, we will go to the ends of the earth to protect the sequence. Because one is, it is the optimal delivery of the job. The second aspect of it is, it it is fundamental to protecting people's jobs and the ability for them to go do their good work, and thus our ability to deliver the contract requirements or the contract scope.
Right. One of the new pieces of work that you've picked up is operation of the Transuranic Waste Processing Center. I understand you just did your first shipment to WIP under your operational control. I'm wondering how that transition has gone in terms of UCOR taking over operation of the TWPC, and is that something that you feel is in your wheelhouse and was kind of a natural part of your operations, or did it require some special adjustments?
Yeah, a great question. And well, first of all, we're really excited to have that scope, because I'll start with the back end of your question. It kind of finishes off putting the final arrow in our quiver of our waste hierarchy, our waste factory. Okay, because the only thing that we were really missing in a comprehensive waste hierarchy, or the ability to manage and disposition and effectively treat waste, which is really the product of us knocking buildings down and digging up soil, is the waste factory. So really, for us, everything is centric around the waste factory. It's at the center of the atom, so it's like any nucleus. It stabilizes everything or destabilizes everything. And so the ability to add transuranic waste packaging, processing, segregation, all the CCP stuff you do for WIP, and then ultimate ship to WIP for disposal was a fundamental step for us, because we believe that there is going to be legacy transuranic waste that comes out of the deactivation and then ultimately demolition of like the legacy isotope facilities in the central campus of the Oak Ridge National Lab. And so that gave us another tool in the waste management toolbox. Now, to the front end of your question, how did the transition go? It went extremely well. And I would say that it went extremely well for two reasons. One, we brought highly qualified, long-standing leaders in the transuranic waste business with a lot of experience, both in the generation of transuranic waste, people that ran H Canyon for a decade.
That's what I remember.
Yeah, right. People who ran the Advanced Mixed Waste Treatment Facility and the transuranic program in Idaho to lead that effort. The second thing was the absolute professionalism, competency, capability of the TWPC personnel. There was
the crew you inherited.
Yes, right,
yes.
the incumbent crew that we inherited.
Right.
They have comported themselves in an amazing way that very much to me was reminiscent. I just told them this. I set a roundtable with them in the last week or so. Exactly what we saw in 2011 when we came here, which was when we held a series of town hall meetings and it began to interact with the folks that were going to now be the players on our team, right? The people who take the field to play every day, your players. I'll tell you, what I saw in 2011 was exactly what I saw here in 2022 with them, which was some of the best players in the game who want to get on the best team and want to be part of some of the best coaches. And you know, Mike, when you put all that together, you win games.
Right.
And that certainly happened in 2011 with, you know, thousands of people becoming part of Team UCOR, and it certainly happened in 22 with, you know, 150 plus folks becoming part of Team UCOR. You know, these are truly subject matter experts, operational experts, RADCON experts in the area of transuranic waste processing.
One of the things that you did under your new contract was establish a diversity, equity, and inclusion organization. I'm wondering just if you could talk a little bit about why you think diversity is important in an organization, and what are your expectations from having this new group as part of UCOR?
Yeah. Well, I have sort of a fundamental, kind of more analytical answer, and then a more practical one that dovetails in with that. So I think you're familiar with it because we've gotten to work together for a long time, and you had a tenure here with us as part of Team UCOR, which we have always appreciated. Is that we run under every company has a governance model, right? And there's all kinds of different governance models. We run under a shared governance program and approach, and what's fundamental to shared governance is that kind of the buzz line of it is that everybody has a seat at the table. What that really means is that it is an inclusive, governed, and run organization. Okay, it doesn't mean there isn't fiduciaries. It doesn't mean there isn't structure. That there's legal elements of things that are done. Mm-hmm. But what it does is it marries up everybody who has a stake in the game there, whether it's the owner, whether it's the players in the field, whether it's the people that host the stadium, the city, the municipality, the stakeholders. Everybody has a seat at the table, which is inclusion, which is kind of fundamental, like to our safety culture, which is worker engagement and a leadership commitment to have that. And so all that now falls under this shared governance, which at the core of it, its value is inclusion. And what you see from everybody being at the table or full-on inclusion is that the diverse perspectives, experiences, both in one's personal life, professional life, lifespan, all of that, mm-hmm. all of a sudden starts to come in a very beneficial way. So you're building a gestalt, right? And that's now happening. And what you find is that by the virtue of that's happening through inclusion, at least this is our experience, is that you are now mutually developing equity together, right? Everybody's at the table for a reason. And some of it is just commonly fundamental, right? You got to make a living, right? Mm-hmm. But at the end, we're all seeking an equity from this. And what I have found with shared governance is that at the end, by being all included and having a shared role in the enterprise, is that we mutually develop our equity. We don't have equity generated at the expense of a stakeholder or at the expense of a worker. So this concept that the only way you can be profitable is at the expense of others is completely washed away. Mm-hmm. And so what I kind of tell folks about that is it's like this concept, because we can all fall behind it then, that everyone at the table will agree that we will never generate profit or gain at the expense of the environment, the people who do the work every day, or the client. And we're all there together. Mm-hmm. Now it's a very trust-based governance model, mm-hmm. right? So who you invite is important, who they are is important, all mm-hmm. that. But at the end, you now have essentially fundamentally DEI, right? Because you have full-on inclusion, you have mutual equity growth, no longer equity at the expense of another mm-hmm. body, person, entity, and that is a result of people's diversity, mm-hmm. and so that's was always my vision, okay, or where we got with regard to it, and we, with all the things that are being done, in the form of executive orders to tie in sustainability, environmental justice, and all those things. We just saw this perfect marriage coming together, with regard to all of that. And so we said we need to take the next step as a company regarding that. So that's what we did as part of our management approach. And and this. The more practicable piece of this too is that by driving more inclusion brings a broader breadth to resourcing the company. And there's a war for talent going on, right? There's not enough people to do all the work.
Right.
And something that we kind of reached somewhat of a professional agreement about amongst the four big prime contractors around here is that resourcing is not going to be effective here on the reservation if I just hire Mike away from you and he comes here and then University of Tennessee Battelle, they hire Mike away from me, and so all we have is unrealistic inflated wage escalation, and no more work gets done. Matter of fact, one could argue less gets done holistically.
Right.
So we then said we need to look to where we can garnish more resources, because we're hiring everybody that graduates. The collective we, and it's not like UT can, if we want to use them as the single example, can increase their enrollment. Their enrollment's at maximum. There's no more places to people to sleep and go to dorm rooms and classroom. So we looked and said, well, we can use DEI as a way to broaden our resourcing pool. So we should consider entering into long-standing relationships with minority-serving institutions, historically black colleges and universities. We should take advantage of all the work all the efforts that are getting initiated, out of executive order, out of the White House here, like mentoring environmental scholars, which is a wonderful Department of Energy program. You see a number of granting programs come. You may have seen some of the press about how a number of our HBCU partners got major grants through the department. And we should establish extend our partnerships into that. And so, we have multiple HBCUs that we have as partners, and they're not just resourcing partners. They're technological partners. They're partners that are participating in our digital transformation initiatives, all those kind of things. But at the end, it all brings opportunity. So resourcing that we need. We have a number of our interning programs grounded in these now. We just hired our second mentoring environmental scholars, MES graduate. We participated for the first time in DOE's Fellows Program at FIU, Florida International University, which is run by a former EM1.
Yes.
Yeah. So again, extending those partnerships. She has a wonderful frame of reference, right? She knows, and so we've now got these conduits. In areas that are very difficult to resource, like environmental services, like environmental sciences. We aren't going to get there with that gap. And so that's that whole resourcing piece and our obligation and duty to do that. And why not turn that into an opportunity for those that are underserved?
Right. We're covering a lot of territory here, and I appreciate your time in sharing your views with us. I want to shift gears for a minute, and most of the major DOE cleanup sites, including Oak Ridge, rely on on-site waste disposal facilities to get their work done efficiently. And I know here in Oak Ridge, you're reaching capacity on the existing site. I think someone has said it's at 80% or so capacity, and there are plans underway for a new disposal facility. Can you tell us how that's going? Kind of give us an update on the status of that and what the outlook is for having that completed?
Yeah, absolutely. It's we touched a little bit on the concept of waste hierarchy and waste factory and how it's really at the center of stabilizing and optimizing any environmental cleanup job. The most successful jobs, you will always find the most successful waste management programs. That's not to take anything away from the folks that do everything else, but they're enabled by the ability to effectively and efficiently disposition the waste. And so we've had just an absolutely amazing waste factory here, right? We've transported waste over 8.2 million miles safely. We've just disposed of, almost 2 million cubic yards of waste safely. We've treated about right at a billion gallons of low-level liquid waste, and one of the things that is absolutely foundational to our waste factory, waste hierarchy, is the ability to disposition effectively, cost-effectively, solid waste. And that's where the current disposal facility has played such a huge role. The EMWMF is its acronym, and it's the one that's about 80% full. So when it got to about 60% full, with the belief that there was a lot more to go, and we believe we were going to be the ones who do it, not to be arrogant about it, but we were going to go out and win the next one. We talked about that, and we were duty bound to make sure that you could sustain this level of performance, whether it was us or somebody else, that we went on this journey for the environmental management disposal facility, the second disposal facility, with the same understanding that it is foundational, because it is the place where you dispose of the most volume, but the lowest hazardous waste. Again, all the concerning high rad, high curie, hazardous waste, as Rick would call it, that all goes off-site. But you got to have a place to put the more benign, high volume waste, and that's an engineered disposal facility.
And a lot of that is debris and material from the demolition?
Yes. It is predominantly building debris and predominantly soil. That's remediated from source sites.
Okay.
And you got like a formula between debris and structural steel and soil, and you got rules, and then you dispose of it in these disposal units. So we're really in a good place with the second disposal cell, or EMDF. You ultimately have to get a license or an authorization from what's called the Federal Facilities Act parties, which is a tri-party agreement or legal relationship between the state you reside in, so that's the state of Tennessee here, the region of the EPA that you belong to, which is Region 4, and then the lead agency responsible for the environmental cleanup. In this case, it's Department of Energy. And that authorization is referred to as a record of decision. And why it's called a record of decision is because it's both technically validated, but it is also site-based validated. So there's a community component to it, right? There's public comment, public acceptance, for a lack of a better terms. All that culminates in a ROD, or a record of decision. So that was a big deal for us. We got that in 22. That then sets you on the path to being able to do final site design, site surveys, early site preparation. And I'm really happy to tell you that all the surveying's done, the site design is done, and we're really now under a small business getting ready to do site prep activities. We're now moving into the site work stages. We're getting a contract in place with a small business to do vegetation removal. Like I said, surveying is completed, and site prep activities. We'll begin doing road relocation and site contouring and grading activities, probably early summer. Let's call that the Memorial Day time frame, and then we'll move into actually beginning construction of the associated water treatment facility that goes with the disposal facility, and begin the construction of cells. And then there's actually a demonstration area. It's called a groundwater demonstration. You have to build a simulated cell and show that you can maintain operation of a cell configuration to a prescribed depth to groundwater. It's essentially like a license requirement. And so we'll do that demonstration also. But we'll be into serious construction here in February, doing the vegetation removal. Timing is important. You have to do vegetation removal consistent with the wildlife plan, so that you're not disruptive to habitat type of things. And so we got to make sure we have vegetation removal done by the end of March timeframe.
The existing facility, the EMWMF, is I think about 20 years old now.
Yes.
In operation around 20 years. And it has an outstanding safety record during its time of operation, which should give reassurance to anybody who looks at the operation of this new facility. And I would think you would expect the new facility to maintain and improve on that safety record over time.
Absolutely. That's the significance of an engineered Superfund or CERCLA licensed disposal facility, right? It's a couple key attributes of it is that it has a significantly engineered and prescribed liner or protective barrier system, very, very involved, very thorough. It also, any water that comes in contact with any of the disposal unit cells has to be treated and managed and dispositioned. And then each year that it's operable, the licensing parties come in and do a protectiveness evaluation and give you a protectiveness determination, so that nothing can ever get away from you with regard to that. Like you said, 20 years plus at EMWMF, every year determined to be independently protective. Never once a notice of violation, never once a free release of contact water, leachate water at any time. So, and that's a tried and true design. This is not specific to Oak Ridge. CERCLA disposal units are the technology, the design, the operation is very mature, and so that will move straight to EMDF. It also has the added benefit of having its own standalone water treatment facility, so it can even be more responsive to water needs, which again, in East Tennessee, you got to manage water. So
absolutely. On another topic, in your public statements, you talk a lot about partnership, and I'd like for you to talk a little bit about who your partners are, who you consider to be your partners when you refer to partnership, and why is that so important to a successful cleanup operation?
Yeah. So I know that you've seen our partnering diagram before because you were part of developing it. So I'm going to talk through it that way. I'll talk what's at the top and then what's at the foundation of it. So at the top of every partnering relationship is going to be the owner and the client. And that's pretty expansive here now. Our cognitive agency client is certainly Department of Energy, Environmental Management, or EM, but we're serving other DOE clients now, Office of Science and NNSA, because again, I can't think of a single parcel or building that we're remediating and cleaning up that isn't going for federal land reuse. And every one of those parcels is directly tied to the Office of Science, National Strategic Science Plan, and at Y12 to the National Defense Plan and the Nuclear Deterrence Strategy. And so cleanup plays a pretty big role now. It's more than just environmental liability reduction. So we have all three of those offices of the department as partners sitting at the top. Next is all the companies that make up UCOR, right? We have three principal owners. We have Amentum Corporation as the majority owner. We have Jacobs as a principal partner, and we have Honeywell as a minority partner. And so they make up a critical partnership by virtue of the fact that I mean, forget the fact that they own the company, and I mean, at the end of the day, they're ultimately my boss, but that we make a lot of home office reach back and parent guarantee reach back in our offers to the government. It's one of the reasons they pick us is because of the depth of who owns us, and you know, that's again back to the corporate stewardship. So that's the city of Oak Ridge, that's Anderson County, Roane County. We've expanded that into Campbell County, Morgan County, because again, we're resourcing a lot of folks out of there. Certainly Knox County in the relationship with University of Tennessee, and then all the other kind of economic councils that make up the middle of it. So we've got the East Tennessee Economic Council, we've got ATIBA, which is another business advocacy group, we got Energy Community Alliance, and then we have our regulator population in there again. So back EPA at a headquarters level, EPA at a regional level, the state of Tennessee in all of its all its commissions. So the TDEC, the Department of Environment and Conservation. We've got ECD, Economic Community Development. We've got Tennessee Department of Labor. We've got the Office of the Governor. All those regulatory and stakeholder partners. And then let me get to what is the foundation of the partnership, which is really the workforce. And so over half the company is made up by represented folks. You had on the podcast Sean McGarvey a while back,
yes.
Speaking actually to that partnership and the role it's played here. And so foundational to the partnership is the people who do the work every day. And so we really extend ourselves into critical partnership relationships with the greater AFL-CIO, the North American Building Trades Union, or the Building Trades Department, the Metal Trades Department, and all that goes on there, because they represent the operational side of our business. Building Trades represents the construction side. And then all their members, every local, all the affiliates. I mean, we have outstanding partnerships with International Union of Operating Engineers, the Electrical, Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the Laborers International Union, all those affiliates who resource our job and represent the folks that are part of our team. We extend our partnership to them. The key is that if you're going to use shared governance as a model to govern your enterprise, your company, your organization, the people that are invited to sit at the table have to be partners. They can't just solely have a contractual relationship with you or a statutory relationship. They have to be partners. And so that's why when you look at our partnering arrangement, you look at our partnering diagram, you see a lot of partners represented in there, and every one of them have a seat at this table together. And then we're back to the generating mutual equity, nobody left behind, full inclusion. That's what your partners expect of you. You don't wrong your partners. You don't do things at the expense of your partners. Whether you're in a personal relationship, you don't do that if you want it to work. And it certainly, extends itself into business relationships.
I'd like, we're getting close to the end here. I'd like to get back for a minute to the end states that we were talking about earlier, because I want our viewers and listeners to have a clear understanding of some of the benefits that are coming out of cleanup. I mean, the government, the Department of Energy is investing billions of dollars in cleaning up these sites, and particularly here in Oak Ridge, there's a benefit that's evolving for the regional economy, for technology on a national basis, and I'd like for us to discuss that just a little bit. I know we talk about Y12 and OR&L. The cleanup is going to really clear land for new missions, and you're turning over land to give back to the owners to do important things for the future. At the East Tennessee Technology Park or Heritage Center, you're starting to attract a lot of industries, which was the whole purpose of the cleanup. Can you talk about that a little bit in terms of what's happening there, the kind of industries that are coming in, and what they'll mean for the future, both on a national scale from an energy standpoint and locally and regionally from an economic standpoint?
Yeah, it's absolutely significant, and I'll talk kind of maybe at a macro level, and then we'll get to Heritage Center and what's happening there. So we came to a pretty stark realization around the 2016 timeframe that environmental cleanup is again they're major undertakings. It's generational in nature, and thus it is a sustainable industry, and we really wanted to understand what that meant because above and beyond the moral and ethical obligations to do environmental cleanup, there's a lot of legal drivers to do it. But first and foremost, it's really about reducing environmental liability because it's the third largest liability the American taxpayer holds as a country. And this site has been able to master that, driving that down. But that's not the end of the story. Because when you can link environmental liability reduction to reindustrialization, brownfield redevelopment, enabling greenfield development, and federal land reuse, future federal emissions, you now begin to tie the economic outcomes of environmental cleanup to the economic development outcomes of both future federal emissions and commercial emissions. And these numbers here in this site are astronomical. So the environmental cleanup industry in East Tennessee generates $1.3 billion a year GDP equivalent and puts about roughly $300 million in disposable income directly into these communities. So that's direct cash infusion into the communities in the form of housing and restaurants and lodging and recreation and so forth and so on. And then when you extend that to where the current missions are commercial federal that are all tied together at a reservation level, whether you want to call that science and defense and cleanup together as three principal industries, it's $6.5 billion a year of GDP equivalent, with about $2.9 billion in disposable income being infused into this multi-county region that make up East Tennessee. It is a mega business in itself from an economic development. And we're talking something of the magnitude, in my opinion, of FedEx in Memphis, for example, Volkswagen in Middle Tennessee. And so that further fuels the fire on sustaining that and driving that, and keep driving this connectivity of successful accelerated environmental cleanup makes parcels available for future economic development. So let's fast forward to Heritage Center or the East Tennessee Technology Park. That's above and beyond accelerating the cleanup and eliminating the risk of an additional $500+ million of environmental liability. That made that parcel that roughly 1,800 acres available for economic development 4 years earlier. And again, fate favors the prepared. So that then coincides with a drive towards the nuclear renaissance of this country being lined up with clean energy, green energy, zero footprint generation. That now then takes you to small modular reactors because you got to get to the economics to produce the green energy in a cost per kilowatt affordable way, both capital and operating. That then leads to new fuel configurations. And all of that coalesces to be, where's the right place to put all of that? And that's at Heritage Center. And these are commercial decisions made by companies to come and invest hundreds of millions of dollars in the nuclear renaissance of this country. Companies that are centered all over the United States, from California, from Ohio, from New York, from New Jersey, you can go on and on. Mm-hmm. And so we have two major fuel fabricating companies that have now sited, one at a greenfield location, one at a brownfield location, none of which would have been possible if the cleanup hadn't been completed and hadn't been accelerated. And then we have major small modular reactor initiatives. We have a test facility by Kairos Power that's being developed. We have the TVA, GE, Hitachi partnership announcement at the old Clinch River Rueter site to put a small modular reactor. So we're now completely positioned for this renaissance to take place, cradle to grave. Mm-hmm. And we've demonstrated that it can all be done. And so now you have the economics of all of that going there. And now we take that to the east, to I-12 and ORNL, to then, there's no flat land in East Tennessee, right? So brownfield redevelopment, brownfield federal land reuse becomes immensely important. Mm-hmm. Because now missions can be sited here. And lithium processing facility is a great example of that. There were probably a lot of sites across the U.S. that were there. But the site that could produce the most optimum location so that lithium processing facility could partner every day, work in tandem partnership with the uranium processing facility and the uranium storage facility, HEMUF, all of that becomes an enterprise in itself. So getting the biology complex done becomes eminently important, more than just environmental liability. We're doing the same in Central Campus now at the Oak Ridge National Lab, in which the cleanup strategic plan and DOE 10-year plan lines up with the national science plan with regard to advanced high-end computing, quantum computing, medical and radioisotope programs, neutron sciences. All that goes straight through Central Campus. The National Domestic Fusion Program and its siting, and then now it building on this exciting news that came from NIF, at Livermore with the first sustained fusion reaction. Again, the fate favors the prepared, and we are now fully integrated and ready, and have demonstrated the ability at the right scale to meet the cleanup requirements, so it's protective of human health environment, and get the now federal land back in the hands of NNSA and science to go do these major national strategic initiatives that are critical to the country. And so all that owes a thanks, in my opinion, to what happened at K25 /ETTP / now Heritage Center.
Successful cleanup.
Yeah.
Last question, Ken. I want to talk to you on a personal level for just a minute. You are entering your second decade here at Oak Ridge with the cleanup, and you've been involved in the cleanup industry across the complex. What are you, by the time this is finished, you will have spent a good deal of your career and a good deal of your life in environmental cleanup at DOE facilities. I'm curious and interested to know what you see as your personal legacy. When you look back, or people look at the contributions you've made, what do you want them to see? How do you want to be remembered in terms of the work you've done in environmental cleanup?
I think first and foremost for me is that that I was part of something in which we built what we sold and we finished what we started. Whether that goes to the early stages of my career at Savannah River Site with the Defense Waste Processing Facility, or the work that's now been done here, which is we have done unto others what you like done to yourself. If people make a commitment to you, especially if it is legally important, or better yet, protectively important, that think of the doctor that works or that helps your child. What do you expect of them? That's probably the biggest piece for me. That I got to be a part of that. That I got to lead that. Being very personal about it, I always had a vision to be sitting here, and everybody had many different reasons, but my reason was was driven by what I just shared with you. That I felt that I could make a difference to ultimately build what we sold and finish what we start, develop and deliver a protective of human health and environment outcome and environmental liability, and to generate within the community that I live the economic prosperity that would be a pathway to the middle class for everyone, and to get to experience the same thing that hard work in this industry produced for Ruth and I, which has been a wonderful life. Mike, life for me started as a general laborer at 17. I reflect on that a lot. Then went to become a chemical operator, then went on to become an instrument and control tech, and then got my interest peaked to then go and get an engineering degree in chemical engineering. But all of that was all interesting enough. All in the chemical industry was all in kind of environmental stewardship kind of things. It was sustainability things like solvent reclamation and solvent recovery from the environment and things like that. And so I've been on this path, and for me, you never know where things are going to go, but I always felt that, and always made an internal commitment to myself that I was going to hold myself accountable to when you self-reflect in the mirror and things like that, that I wasn't going to forget where it all started. And it started with a shovel in my hand. I mean, that's what general laborers did when they were 17. I worked for a firm that did a large piping systems, and so there was a lot of ditch digging, literally. And I can think of those 4 or 5 people that enabled those next steps, and I wanted to be that person for other people, and I wanted to do it on a profound scale. So I wanted to be more than ones and twos, and I wanted to do that ultimately in the community that Ruth and I have made a choice to retire to, or to spend the rest of our lives together in, and that's here in East Tennessee. We own a farm in Campbell County. It's just a hobby, but again, I love the outdoors aspects of it. We enjoy all that part of our life, and I am thankful that I've been, and honored, been given the opportunity to be part of what's happening here, what happened at Savannah River site, and all that it is done as it relates to both environmental remediation and cleanup, and the opportunities it's provided for folks.
Ken, I really appreciate you joining us on the podcast today. Thank you.
You're welcome. I appreciate the opportunity again. I think it's one of my principal duties to all the folks that make up UCOR to tell their story.
Today's episode of the Gone Fission Nuclear Report is brought to you by Fluor. We're building a better world.